I'm Kimberly and this is Floral Art Review, where we have our AI, Design Eye, analyse an old competition design of mine and give us some feedback in terms of the principles and elements of design, which is how it should be judged in floral art, as well as some suggestions for improvement. This is a service that we offer on the website floralartreview.com, so anyone is welcome to use that service and get some feedback on your own designs and help you improve your designs and just see what judges are seeing when you are in a competition. This week's design is titled From Nature's Perspective, was staged on the bench, judged from the front. We could only use Australian native flora in the design and it had to be a contemporary design. Now, contemporary designs are difficult to judge, I'll just put it that way, because they are supposedly based on techniques and interpretations of the moment. So what is happening now in terms of floral art. So it's not a very clearly defined design style. So it's often a good idea to ascertain the type of competition you're in, if they're asking for a contemporary design, and to see if you can get an idea of what they will use to determine whether it is a contemporary design or not. You'll still be judged on the principles and elements of design as a basis, but the contemporary part of it generally refers to the techniques that you are using. So here in this design, I have utilised some wire mesh. I've formed it into a circle and attached it to a metal ring. Often you find them in the cheap shops for tapestry or for decorative features for macrame, a basis for making rings with macrame. So I've used that as the basis because it's a nice solid round base and I could attach the mesh to it. I've bound the mesh to it with gold wire because the base was gold. The wire itself is gold, but you can't see it as clearly in the image. And to that I have added some and woven it inside and outside, so the placements are both in and outside of that cylinder shape that I've made with the mesh. There's Xanthorrhoea, so the grass tree spikes, the spent flower spikes, that's the tall dark ones for those of you who are not familiar with them. Some Craspedia, the belly buttons, the yellow, and then some eucalyptus bark, which is naturally curled as it comes off the trees, and we collect it and keep it in our store of things that we might use one day, and often I will get to use it because I do like to work with its very sculptural piece of plant material that I like to use. And I've got a Banksia flower, just the single one placed near the front of the design. The design didn't place, and in fact no designs in this particular class, in this competition, were awarded a placing at all. The judge that we had is a very strict judge. She has a very clear interpretation of what she believes contemporary floral art is, and she does give us feedback. And the feedback that she gave me for this design was that yes, it was contemporary. I had not really utilised more than one contemporary technique in terms of the structure of the design. It was a good use of negative space, but she felt that the placements of the Craspedia particularly weren't impactful enough, and so I should have masked them, or I should have had them shadowed, so have some placed in a mass and then have others placed as though they were the shadow of that placement. And I took that on board because I wasn't happy with this design. I'm not comfortable with the contemporary design style because it doesn't seem to be any real direction that you need to take. It's very much interpretation depending on the competition and the location. So it's always good to get some sort of feedback. So this analysis today will be interesting because this competition was about probably 5 years ago. And so in terms of contemporary design, it has moved on from this one in particular. When I look at it, the image now, I can see that there's no contrast in the design that creates any sort of impact. So the placements, the Craspedia is sort of evenly placed when you view it, evenly placed around, and I needed to adjust the placements of the Xanthorrhoea, the grass tree spikes as well, because put two of them together, I'll have one very low down, one across, creating a diagonal line perhaps to create some impact in that sense and to take your eye through the design a different way. I am interested, therefore, to see what we've got in terms of this analysis so that I can see where at this point in time, a contemporary design should move, because our AI, Design Eye, is trained constantly on what is happening in the floral art world, and so in terms of contemporary design, it will be up to date as to what I should be looking at if I were to do this design today. So let us move on and see what it's got to say. Looking at line, first of all, the dominant unwavering vertical lines are established by the towering black Xanthorrhoea or grass tree spikes and the slender energetic stems of the Craspedia, the billy buttons. So I have got some very strong vertical lines. Even the bark, although it is curled over, is still placed in very vertical placements. I think that if I wanted to create some tension in the design, I could have angled those a bit more, but then you start to get too much repetition, and that's not something that you would normally see in a contemporary design at that time. So form, the rigid cylindrical geometry of the metallic wire framework contrasts beautifully with the irregular organic curling shards of the eucalyptus bark. And I did do that deliberately. I did want the only real movement in the design to be from the bark, because it is such a visually dominant part of the design. I didn't want it to overshadow the very strong lines I was making with the other placements, and so that was again to create a little bit of tension in the design, but not enough so that it was distracting in terms of those vertical lines. Colour. The piece utilises a striking high impact palette. The deep charcoal of the spikes and the earthy terracotta of the bark serve as a dark grounding canvas that makes the vibrant yellow of the Craspedia pop intensely. And it does. You know, if you look at the first thing, when you look at that image, the first thing you see is the yellow. And that's a really good way of using colour in a design, is to make one colour stand out against all of the others rather than have them competing or having them in shades and tints and tones, is to have that very stark contrast, because then if you've got no other contrast in the design in terms of texture or line, colour is going to be your contrast in the design, and you always need to have some sort of contrast. So texture. There is excellent tactile variety here. The soft fuzzy spheres of the billy buttons play against the coarse dense spikes, the brittle papery bark and the cold industrial wire. So what I've got in terms of texture is rough and smooth. I've got shiny and matte, and I've got soft and hard. And so there's good textural contrast. It was towards the end of the time where I was focusing mostly on texture in my designs, and I started to get quite comfortable with making sure that I had a few different textural contrasts in a design, but kept the textural contrast within the plant material. So the plant material was always the hero of the design, regardless of whether it was for the colour or for the texture. So space. The hallmark of this contemporary design is its outstanding use of negative space. The wire armature captures a distinct volume of air, allowing the viewer's eye to travel completely through the arrangement rather than being blocked by dense material. Now this is probably an indication of how far contemporary design has come in 5 years, because at the time I felt that and I remember feeling that there was too much space in the design, in that central part of the design, even though it does make you move through the design, look through the design. These days, space is far, far more important, and we're almost veering towards one or two plant placements in a design and being very still and very calm in the designs. And so it's interesting to see this analysis 5 years after the design, and to see that perhaps it was ahead of its time when I put it into the competition. I'll think of it that way. Contrast. The stark colour contrast between the vibrant yellow and the absolute black is the most arresting feature, closely followed by the juxtaposition of wild native flora against an exposed metallic grid. So as I said earlier, I like to have that contrast in one part of the design. So one of the principles and elements is what will feed the contrast in the design, and in this case it's the colour. And I think that that's probably the one thing with a contemporary design that works best if you're looking for contrast, is to make sure that your contrast in a contemporary design is based on colour contrast, because anything else starts to muddy the waters in terms of how you are putting your design together. So balance. The design achieves a successful asymmetrical balance. The heavy, dark visual weight of the tall spikes on the edges is effectively counterbalanced by the bright, scattered visual energy of the yellow spheres woven through the centre. And so this is probably where the judge 5 years ago would differ in the analysis. This is a very much an analysis of this time, and I think that perhaps what the judge was saying to me was that the placements were too even around the design, and to mass them to give them a little bit more different visual balance was right for that time. And now this design is right for this time in terms of contemporary design. I'm still not happy with that even what appears to be even placements around the design. I would still move towards having them, what the judge said at the time, of having them grouped. So even with these analyses as they come through, you need to think about what it's saying to you and what you know of competition or of designs that have done well in competitions, and think about how you might marry those two viewpoints. This is not, the analysis that we get through this system is not the definitive analysis. It is a part of an education journey for you, so that you can look at a design and get some help with interpreting those principles and elements of design at the same time as developing your own design style and the things that you're comfortable doing. As I've said in many of the other videos, I'm comfortable with a more sculptural design. So the current contemporary trend works well for me. But there is part of that contemporary trend that puts things together in a way that to me looks very messy, and I don't like that design style. So I will maintain my development of my designs in terms of contemporary design, in this way of having lots of negative space, of having the contrast with colour rather than texture, those sorts of things. So it's all about finding your path and the things that you're comfortable doing, as well as understanding, if you are going to enter a competition, how they might be viewed in terms of the judging of that competition. Let us move on. Rhythm. The varying heights and staggered placements of the Craspedia create a bouncing staccato rhythm that leads the eye up, down and around the captured space. That's true, and I think that works in a contemporary design. So often we will look at a design and we'll say it needs some rhythm and it needs to flow, and we use our hands in this way and say, it needs to be the movement through the design, and it's all about waves and smooth transitions. In this one, because it's a contemporary design, that staccato placement, so the up and down, the hard lines, is more appropriate for a contemporary design than it would be for any other kind of design. So I've got that part of it down quite well. I still don't like the individual placements. Even if we had them massed, had the Craspedia massed, I could still have that up and down movement through the design, which is, I think, it needs in terms of contemporary design and the line that is in this design. So let's have a look now at some of the suggestions from Design Eye and see what we could do with this design. So the first one is refining the exposed mechanics. In contemporary floral design, exposed frameworks are entirely acceptable, but they must be geometrically flawless. The wire cylinder here appears slightly buckled and wavy in places. Utilising a stiffer gauge wire or ensuring the cylinder is perfectly tensioned would drastically sharpen the aesthetic. So that's a good pickup, because that is very much an appropriate suggestion for this design. It needs to have those hard lines. So the only thing in the design that gives you that curved and softer shape is the bark. Everything else is a very straight, hard line, and the cylinder needs to be the same, even though it's of different material. Harmonising the base. The shiny gold ring anchoring the design clashes slightly with the rugged, earthy nature of the Australian botanicals. Wrapping this base ring in a matte black floral tape or covering it with crushed bark would ground the piece more naturally while preserving its contemporary edge. I think the bark is the way to go, or what I could do, that the Xanthorrhoea spikes, their seed heads that are on it, I've actually got some that have disintegrated off the spike, and so I could have glued them to the base, and that would have brought the design together, given it a nice black base, that everything else would have popped up out of it. And so I think, and once again, that is a very good idea in terms of the mechanics of this design. And the third one is integrating the focal anchor. The single Banksia attached to the lower left exterior feels somewhat tacked on compared to the beautifully integrated bark pieces inside the cylinder. Tucking the Banksia partially behind the wire or weaving it deeper into the internal structure would better unify the base composition. I almost think I don't need it. I think that if I did have it, I should have another 2 smaller ones somewhere else, or perhaps sliced it up and put the slices horizontally through the wire mesh so that they look like they were caught in it, and it gives it another plane and another line. Circular they would be, and so they would reflect the circular base itself but be in and out of the cylinder. And so I think that's probably what I would do, rather than have that solid mass of the Banksia flower, is to slice it up and put the slices horizontally at different levels through the mesh so that it's in and out of the mesh itself. So another suggestion that's worth considering for this design. This is where, regardless of how long we have been in the floral art world, we still can benefit from some education and some guidance in terms of the designs, and this is why I rely now on this system to give me some help with designs when I am competing. So there we have our analysis for this week from nature's perspective, using Australian natives in a contemporary design. I hope that's given you some food for thought in terms of contemporary design. I'll be back again next week with another design. I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review.